Well, it's started already. The rebuilding has already started. So I see a couple of years. But
tourism hasn't come back yet, hasn't returned. So a lot of musicians played for tourism. They're not playing as much.
Going through there, it looks like a bomb just exploded because the water pressure, not only did it go in and flood, but the floodwater stayed so long that it turned old wood and mortar and drywall, it turned it into mush.
It truly brings out the best and worst of people when catastrophic events happen like this. And I've met a lot of different people, and I have to say that it's been more positive things that have went on than negative.
Well, I think it's related to stress and overload. I have what I call Katrina brain. I don't remember things. Normally I have a very acute recall, and I can't remember things. I work in 24-hour increments, and if it's something that I really need to remember, I write it down, and I try to write it all in one book because I can't remember where I put my notes. And I know that that's a stress-related symptom. I'm in healthcare, and I definitely know that that's stress. And
that's what tourism does to a town. It makes everybody that lives in it a worker for tourism.
Yes.
I said, and I told this friend, I said, if we show up at these Mardi Gras parades and they're presented by Coca-Cola, then we are working for the Coca-Cola company. We are working for a virulent form of capitalism.
You'll stay no matter.
I'll stay no matter what.
You'll rebuild.
I'll rebuild no matter what.
Again and again.
And again, just like they do in LA when the mudslide take those big mansions down and they rebuild all over again. Well, I'm the same way. I don't have a mansion though, but I'm gonna.
Every man's home is his mansion.
That's right. You're right.
Yes, we've been surviving through what you see us doing now.
Which is?
We do different jobs. We do roofing, we do plumbing, we do it scrapping when we're not doing, yes, making something out of nothing.
it's all gone. So here you have people that are retired thinking they're going to live out the rest of the remainder of their lives.
So was that the fall of the Roman Empire because they had a weakened infrastructure?
That's true, exactly. And also they created a technology, i.e. their roads, which allowed the barbarians to enter into the empire.
That's so we've got like teaching art students to paint so you could create your own competition.
Yes, exactly. Doesn't make any sense, do it. But, there's a book just came out getting 5-star reviews by Peter Heather, a man, an historian. It's called The Fall of the Roman Empire. And his whole approach to the Roman Empire is that it was destroyed. The empire was self-destructive. Because in a sense, all empires are self-destructive, because what you end up doing is making enemies of the barbarians that are going to destroy you. Plus, you have a technology, i.e. the Roman roads. In our case, we've created this unbelievable transportation infrastructure throughout the entire world. They just get on a plane, they go to New York, and they destroy it, right? So it's a no-win situation, because the whole catastrophe of this storm begins at the federal level. And it begins with that fucking war in Iraq.
You're from New Orleans, born and raised in New Orleans?
Yes, New Orleans East. New Orleans East. That's where it really, I thought New Orleans East was terrible, but we just come from over here around the lakefront area, and all the sand is all over the roofs, all in, where the levee broke.
Right.
Yeah, we just came from over that area.
How far is that from here?
That's about 5 minutes from here, and it's devastating.
In New Orleans East, where you live, what happened in your neighborhood?
It's just totally demolished.
Block after block after block?
Block after block after block.
And your home?
It's demolished.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Were you home? Were you home? Were you there? Or did you evacuate?
No, we had evacuated.
Driving along through Slidell and that area, Eden Isle, where all those beautiful homes are. You're driving down this little road heading for a bridge going into Orleans. And as I'm driving along, one of the few trees left standing, about 30, 40-foot tree, up in the top of this tree, I'm looking up, and there's one of those cast iron, claw-footed tubs.
No way.
30 feet up in this tree. And I'm saying,
Somebody
what?
in it taking a bath?
No, fortunately not. Fortunately, they weren't there when it went up there. But ask yourself what type of force picked this thing up. And we're talking about half a mile in. And what kind of force picked this, 300-pound cast iron tub and put it 30 feet up in a tree? That's just, to me, that's incredible to think that much
Right.
force and rhythm, it just had to come in wave after wave and just devastate, just turn the whole area into a
Well,
pile
and
of
then when
sticks.
you see boats.
We had, and I can't remember, I don't know all of them, and I don't know the history of the floods, but apparently we had an 1813 flood, which I don't know very much about, that came about water all the way to Lee Circle. But we had water, I think flood water even in this area, so that's almost the same. And there was a 1858 flood that was about the lake came into the city and equalized at about 3 feet above sea level. And there was a 1909 flood that was about 3 feet above sea level in the city, and this one that we just had is about 3 feet above sea level. And then we had the flooding that went on in the lower Ninth Ward during Hurricane Betsy, which came in because they had a siphon that takes that water from the lower Ninth Ward underneath the Industrial Canal and then throws it into the 3 canals that go to the lake that are west of the Industrial Canal, and the siphon went backwards. So
There's a map. There's a map actually shown of the Picayune, but it's been hanging around for a long time, since 1878. It was drawn by an engineer named Hardy. And every place that flooded in New Orleans in 2005, every place that flooded is depicted as swamp in the Hardy map of 1878. And the flooding, if you do the overlay of the flooded areas and put it on this map by Hardy, you will see that it's one and the same.
It's almost like the water reclaiming its original land.
And you blame nature? How can you blame nature? Nature is not going to, it's here before we are, right? Exactly. But the thing is, technology, we fell for it. We fell for a technological solution to the city's growth, to its morphology, whatever you want to call it.
Well, you're driving down a main street, and there's a boat in the middle. Over in Lakeview, there's a house where the water picked up a boat. And when you look, you see the boat in the front yard, and you look and you see a hole that goes right through the house. Right where this boat smashed right through the house like a bullet and went right through the house. And you can look, you can see the boat, and you can see the hole, and you know that this boat came crashing through the back of the house where the water crashed through. It just went through the house like a bullet. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. See that kind of force, but the devastation is overwhelming. You go 4 blocks out of the front. We're in a shell here.
Yeah. There's nothing to belong to. You're not sure what you belong to. So in this state of chaos, what do you feel like you belong to?
Oh, I feel as if I'm very, very blessed with family and friends, people that have been very supportive. You learn very quickly that you can't depend on some of the systems that you were comfortable with. When you've had everything taken away from you, you have to start all over again, and something that we as Americans are not used to dealing with. We feel and are entitled to the things that we work for, and to have a negative factor come along and just rip them away from you, it's like I can only think of something like the bombing in World War II that might have been somewhat similar. It's just everything is gone. Your church is gone. Everything familiar, everything that is part of your support system is gone. And I was talking to a neighbor on the telephone who has moved about 50 miles away from New Orleans right now because they're waiting to find out. I was speaking with her on the phone yesterday, and I was telling her how great it was to go into what used to be our favorite neighborhood grocery store. And I said I like to go there because it's familiar, and I like to go there because I run into people that I know, because in the neighborhood where I am, I don't know anybody. And I said I'm even happy to see people I don't like. But I know.
So you started sprinkled throughout the United States who New Orleans was their home.
That God is using them to affect other lives.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it.
Yes, he's using this experience to bring them forward and to raise them up as the people that he called them to be in this end time.
Trash. 2,500 trucks of trash every day, piled 2 to 3 stories high. Everybody,
For 4 months.
For 4 months. Everybody's lives, everybody's furniture, everybody's everything just dumped in muck.
Keep the faith. Don't give up. Know that this is just a beginning and it's not an ending.
I have never, ever, ever seen such amazing mold in my entire life. So many different forms of it. Big black hairy blobs and green blobs and yellow hanging things, and it was just disgusting. That's the only word that I have been able to use from when I first walked into my house. My first reaction was, this is just disgusting. The smell, the lack of sound in the neighborhood, no birds, no people, no laughter, no cars, nothing, just silence, and this just ooze, this black, disgusting ooze, and all the mold and the smells and everything like that. Just very difficult to describe.
So they drained the land, and so it allowed for suburbanization. But it went slowly. It went very slowly. It was hard to get these people out of town. They loved it so much. You know,
Out of New Orleans.
Out of New Orleans itself, out of the quarter, out of the, like there's an article that was written about 1912. It all begins around there. The same year the Titanic sunk. You can see like another work of technology, right? But there's an article in a magazine called Architectural Arts and Its Allies, which talks about the arrival of the California bungalow to New Orleans. Mm-hmm. See, and the California bungalow is the first suburban house. And besides Lakeview, there was another area that was being developed called Gentilly Terrace, and it was built on the old Gentilly Ridge, on Gentilly Road. And
Which is another flooded area.
yeah, well, not as bad, but bad enough. And that's kind of ironic because it's on a ridge, And the funny thing is, I think there's been a lot of subsidence too. I mean, there's been a lot of the city's actually sunk too. I mean, in other words, it's not as high as it was in the 19th century. So you really got a problem here. But anyway, the California bungalow was touted as being the arts and crafts house. It was touted in this article as being a magnificent, healthier replacement for the shotgun house that people have been living in New Orleans because of these cramped neighborhoods.
Do you think there's hope for rebuilding those homes, or do you think it's knock it down and start it over?
Depends on the particular house that you have. If you have a slab house, it's a little high. It's a little harder to. If you have a one-story slab house, you can, and if it happens to be really good construction, and you really like it, and it wasn't considered a tear down before, you can go in there and shore it up. If you have a two-story house, you have more to work with, and probably have one floor that doesn't have any damage at all. If you have a one-story house and it wasn't very good construction, and it was in one of those areas that are sort of holes, the deep holes in the city that people got as much as 11, 12 feet of water and then covered the rooftop of the house. Unless you have a lot of nostalgic feelings for the house and you really want to be back in it, it's probably would be better to tear it down.
And I can still remember the streetcar used to go along that levee when I was a kid. On the right of it was this area that was developed as a streetcar suburb for the city of New Orleans. It was one of our first suburbs. And you can still see, because there's a lot of arts and crafts buildings out there. Raised, though, they were raised. In fact, the picking ran a very interesting picture of this slab house next to one of these arts and crafts raised houses from about 1912, 1914. And there was this miserable, totally inundated slab house. And there was the older house, the older house just sort of reared up, sort of like, like a boat, like a ship, and all painted white. And there was this miserable little gray little house.
But the problem with getting dollars back, you don't get your life back. You can never really figure out exactly how much of value you had in your house. But one of the things I think that is so important that became very clear to me is there are memories in the house. There are things that are treasured. For example, I lost my parents' wedding picture. That can't be replaced.
And was your area affected by Hurricane Katrina?
Yes, ma'am. Basically, the whole Gulf Coast was affected, but New Orleans and Slidell in particular took the brunt of the storm.
How is the status of your house?
We took on a little water, mostly in the garage area, and a lot of wind damage, approximately $50,000 in wind damage. But I will tell anybody that's watching this or read this article that that's minuscule compared to some of the loss here. If you didn't lose life, you should feel fortunate and blessed like I do. So that's
our problem in New Orleans is that it's like Kierkegaard said, people live for the future, but they think backwards. And we fell hook, line, and sinker for a theory of progress, sort of social Darwinism. We had inherited from the 19th century that anything we did was to advance the city, but like for instance, suburbanization, canalization, the Mr. Go thing that was put in by Cokie Roberts' father back in '65, Hale Boggs. That was to advance the economy of the city, but some people were saying at the time, but what about the environment? It's a potential threat, not just to the environment, but to the city itself. It's a funnel for the water that would rush up the flood surge. And they have photographs that they took of that happening this time, So, we're living in a floodplain, they forgot. It's like it's like the Bible, A lot of this phenomenon of the Bible is because people were either, they were either building in a lava flow, and the volcano remained dormant for 500 years. People forgot, like Vesuvius, or that they build in a floodplain. And when Bienville got here, he could see the lay of the land. He said, this city's going to be rather interesting. We'll have to put it on the ridges that were created by the old Mississippi rivers. When the river moves back and forth over thousands of years, and it created these ridges. Interesting. So the city was built on these ridges.
My mother, who's like 85 years old, I have 8 brothers. Wait, 5 brothers, 3 sisters, and we all evacuated together. Maybe about the day before the hurricane. And we drove to DeRidder, Louisiana, where my sister Janice Monette had been there for like about 25 years. And there was 23 of us who evacuated, dogs, you name it. We all stayed in a 3-bedroom house. And we had nothing. I left with nothing. I left my dogs in the house. They drowned. I had about 11 feet of water in my home. I lost everything. My brother, Judge Dennis Donnell, he lost everything. And we stayed there for about my mother and them, they're still out there. They can't come home as of today.
They had flooding in 1947 in Jefferson Parish. But that's before they even suburbanized, you see. Suburbanization is the problem. New Orleans started to suburbanize late. And one of its chief attributes is that it started to suburbanize late. That's why it remained so unusual. Other cities suburbanized because one thing they could. Suburbanization begins right after Civil War. I mean, it begins to get along in the Gilded Age. The biggest cities like Philadelphia, they developed the suburbs. And in those days, the suburbs were like mainly for the rich. The rich, they inherited this sort of Anglo-Saxon thing about living in the country. And you even had it here in New Orleans a little bit. You had your house in the city and you had your plantation out in the country. It's kind of like, you know, the gentleman farm approach. But the Anglo had a certain penchant for living in the country, at least on the weekends, you know. And but anyway, this suburban growth was possible because of rail transit, and that's why you see Lakeview developing along this rail transit line that went all the way out to West End, where there was an amusement park. Because of the swamps. You see, the swamps were an obstacle. And then about the 1890s, 1900, a man named Baldwin Wood invented a drainage system, which is the most advanced drainage system in the world at the time, at least in the West, you know. And pumping stations were employed, and canals. They either deepened the old canals or dug new ones. And so it allowed for the drainage of these areas out towards the lake. And then they could start suburbanizing.
Certain things happen to remind you, to bring you back. And this is why I think that it's a good idea that when people come down here, let them get on a bus, let them take a tour, let them go down there and see what really happened here.
Right.
I mean, just certain things. You go into certain parts of town where the houses look okay, but you can see the flood lines, and everything is dead. Everything green is dead. It's just brown from the watermark all the way down, and the reason is because of salt water. It just poisoned the ground, killed everything green. How are they going to repair that? What's going to be the process to repair that?
Are you talking about the soil itself, the health of the soil? How long
Well,
will
the
it take for
soil you can dig up, I mean, an inch and a half or so down and redo it, but that's the problem. You have to start from the soil. You have to start from underneath
Yes.
and just work up.
How many houses in the Lakeview area have been devastated?
I'm not sure exactly in the Lakeview area, but I think in the greater New Orleans area, it's well over 200,000, somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 homes.
How do you feel about your city, this is your city, being in this state of affairs?
You mean in the total thing?
Yes.
The total picture? A friend of mine said, you know, the storm has, we've been exposed. You know, the city has been exposed to an enormous amount of criticism, and it's like turning a rock over, and you see all these worms underneath the bugs. But we always knew that it was here anyway, except a larger group of people saw it. And a lot of ways, I don't know, you know, like the media, the national media has, you know, you watch this unfold. I just saw it on TV. I mean, we evacuated to Monroe. We watched on TV, so you get to see, you know, 5 different news approaches. You know, Wolf Blitzer says one thing. Well, Wolf Blitzer is like the New York Times. You know, there's that headline in the New York Times: "Comet strikes New York. Women and minorities suffer." Right? So, you know, it's like, see, I think that's part of the problem. We were sitting there and they would show pictures of the 17th Street Canal, which is right up against Lakeview. That was the big flooding scene. They always show the water rushing. So then all of a sudden the cameras would leap across 5 miles to the 9th Ward, and those sons of bitches never showed Lakeview. They never showed it. They never showed one thing going on in Lakeview. They never had any hovering crafts, you know, picking Lakeviewsians off of their roofs. It was always the 9th Ward, but it was the Lakeview got an enormous, huge amounts of water, and it's a huge area. It's enormous.
So Lakeview, I understand, was one of the worst hit areas, and also one of the areas, one of the wealthier areas in New Orleans that got hit. And the damage was caused not from the storm itself, correct me if I'm wrong, but from the levee breaking. Is this correct?
There was storm damage in Lakeview, and but it was minimal. The true damage that was done in Lakeview was caused hours after the storm, when there was a breach in the 17th Street Canal levee, and the whole area flooded.
Family and friends, they're gone.
Family and friends are gone.
They're gone. My mother lost some friends in an old folks home that they didn't get the people out in time, so she lost a couple of friends. They drowned, and everyone's scattered out. New Orleans will never be the same again. They say it will be, But how can it be the same again if all the people are gone and there's no way for them to come back? They're not making a way for you to come back. The mayor Nagin is saying on TV every day, we're going to have 300,000 people back by January. Where are you going to put them to stay? He's not thinking. He's telling us to come back, but he's not giving us no place to stay. If it wasn't for my boss, I'd still be in DeRidder, Louisiana. I wouldn't have no place to come back to. And the rent is going up. Apartments that were like $350 a month, they're now like $700.
Jelly Roll Martin's house, the jazz musicians, his boyhood home, where he lived from when he was 5 to when he was 11 on Frenchman and North Robertson, 1441 Frenchman Street, and that got about 2.5 feet of water in the yard, which I think has messed up the water heaters, and a lot of windows were blown in, and it looks like a dinosaur went up to the house and said, I think I'll have a taste of this, and bit a chunk of the roof and a chunk of the wall is gone, and we were tarps over it, and all the tenants have decided not to come back there. And so it's got a lot of damage in all the rooms, but not an irreparable amount of damage. A tree was...
I was just shocked. I mean,
I remember
the
talking
Gulf
with you.
Coast was a pile of sticks.
I remember talking with you, just saying how you had seen a lot of war.
Yeah.
You never expected to see it in your own backyard.
Yeah, I'd never seen anything like this before. This is the worst thing that I had ever seen.
Out of all the tours of Nam, how many tours of Nam did you do?
Six. And it's not so much the tours, it's the devastation that you see. I was there in, I think it was 1967 or 1968 when the big storm had washed up into Bangladesh and it flooded that whole area. And that was, and the piles of bodies and dead animals going out a mile from the beach was just shocking enough. But the devastation here, the structural devastation, I think, is what got me more than anything else. I mean,
And also maybe because it was so close to home for you, so personal.
it was personal because I knew the landmarks traveling between these. It was shocking because you'd go along and there was anything that you could see that you could recognize, and all of a sudden it dawned on you, oh my God, that's such and such, and just the shocking realization that a landmark that you'd always taken for granted was crushed. I mean, literally, just like somebody had taken a big hammer and just gone along the beach and smash, 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 and leaving a structure standing here and devastation on both sides. And you ask yourself, how did that happen?
But he says, and they tell me that because they don't watch TV, that there's a whole nother reality out there. I said, you bet there is, pal. I said, you bet there. We've just seen it. This wasn't on, it may have been on television, but it wasn't meant for television, you know. But that's what I'm saying. It's like there's a whole philosophical shift. I mean, we don't know it yet, but you can see their feelings are changing. The scales have dropped off their eyes, have seen something that they weren't supposed to see. You know, and also,
about 25% of the people back in the city, if that much. It's hard to figure out how many people we have. I mean, when you drive through the city, you drive about a mile or so from the Mississippi River, and then after that, the houses are just flooded and empty until you get to the ridges. That's only about six blocks wide, and then from there all the way out to the new reclaimed land right at the lakefront. It's all nothing. Yeah.
but they would show that, and then they'd show the West End and all those seafood restaurants people went to and people worked in. This guy right around the corner, right down the block here, Brian, his brother was a cook out of this place called Brunnings, just smashed flat. It was like a smear, this entire area of restaurants. Now, do you think Wolf Blitz is he's never been to Brunnings. I mean, he's probably never even been here at all, you know, because he's heard all the rumors and stuff, you know. Didn't want to go to some nasty place like New Orleans. Yes, all those sodomites and Catholics, you know, and they're all anti-Semites. You know, it's like we're just waiting to rush out of our clubhouses with our hoods on and hang somebody, you know. But and then they would show Canal Street, and I said, "What of the Boston Club? Is the Boston Club flooded?" Right? It's the men's club.
You have such a great sense of humor about it all. I imagine
There's-
you do.
Everybody suffered here. Like a friend of mine said, even rich people. I mean, they're prone to suffering. They die. They have warts. They have everything. I mean, But like we were watching, they would hover over the lake, and they would show the 17th Street Canal, and then they would come along, and there was the yacht club on fire, right? And do you think Wolf Blitzer knows a yacht club from his ass? I mean, he's not going to say, "Oh, here's an excellent shot of the second oldest yacht club in the United States, ladies and gentlemen, burning to the ground," right? They didn't even know what it was.
Geraldo missed that one too, didn't he?
Oh, he's an ass. It was like, they made it turn over our rocks, but they turned over their rocks too, man. It was great to see the mighty suffer embarrassment. It's really great.
I'm the company commander for the 1084 Transportation Unit, and we basically, when we first came aboard, we did security missions. After that, we were on remain recovery. And then after we did the remain recovery, we went back to security and transport missions.
Have you been on active duty since Hurricane Katrina here in New Orleans?
Yes, ma'am. Since the storm hit, we've been on active duty.
Can you share a little more about what those roles have entailed?
Yes, ma'am. Basically, the security missions was to assist the local law enforcement, 24-hour operations. After that, we went on remain recovery, basically securing a site, finding the remains, and keeping the media out of harm's way, and giving those individuals the respect that they deserve who perished in the flood. After recovering the bodies, they would bring them to a location and try to notify the families. After that, we did that for a few weeks, and after that, we went back to security missions, assisting law enforcement and running transport missions, whether it was ICE, canned goods, things of that nature.
Some people have found another life. I mean, that's kind of happens. It's not like you have to stay one place. After all, we're a nation of immigrants. My mother's family came here in 1840. They left Hanover. Now, why on earth did they leave Hanover? I keep asking myself, why didn't they just stay? Well, of course, you can see the attendant unpleasantness of the next 125 years after they left Hanover. I'm glad I'm here. Maybe I would have been, something would have happened to the old DNA. And in fact,
That New Orleans is a great city, and don't believe for 1 second that the people that are evacuated to Houston and to other parts of the United States that they left and they don't want to come home. They do want to come home. They can't come home. There's no place for them to come back to. The owners are not fixing the homes, and when they do fix the homes, they're charging the rent. The rent is unbelievably high, so they can't afford to come back. But let the people know that everyone really wants to come back home.
How can people help? How can those of us outside of New Orleans help? What can we do?
If I knew the answer to that question, I don't know what they can do. I think they can just
Keep it alive.
stay tuned and be aware of what's going on in the city, and be aware that the people that have been displaced, they're making it sound as if though we're troublemakers. We're out there in Houston, we're fighting in school, and we're committing crime. But a lot of that stuff is not true. A lot of the stuff that they're saying is they're forgetting to say that Houston itself could be a problem. They could be causing a problem of why these people are acting the way they are, because a friend of mine who was displaced in Houston, she was going to high school out there, and they were beating her up every day. They were beating her up every day. So when she decided to fight back, what goes on the news? Evacuate Katrina, fighting in school again. But they're not telling the whole story, that they're not being treated fairly. A lot of the young kids are not.
Sounds like there's no real understanding or compassion.
The thing is that we live with this country is now boiled down into special interest. It's called special interest group liberalism. And boy, if you don't belong to a special interest group, you are shit out of luck. In other words, if you're not a part of the Lakeview Association of the World. You don't have feelers out. You don't have fundraisers out in Los Angeles, so there's never been a documentary done on Lakeview. Nothing's ever going to happen. See, Ninth Ward, yes. Ninth Ward's they've got total representation in Congress and the lobbyists, but there's no representation of those people out in Lakeview. Because guess what? They're middle class. Fisher Ames, who is one of the signatories of the Constitution, a Massachusetts Federalist. This is before Unitarianism struck New England. This is back in the 1790s. He wrote, "We've created the kind of government in which only the very wealthy and the very poor will be able to participate, because the rest of us will be working." It's like what H.L. Mencken says in a democracy: you vote for what you want and then you get it good and hard.
So we elect them, but what you're saying is they're not leaders.
Well, yes, because then we have to suffer through them.
Yeah.
And look, New Orleans has been undergoing that for a long time. I would say there's only one elected official in the 20th century that has done anything totally positive for this city. And his name was Robert Maestri. He's the mayor that saved the French Quarter.
My brother, two brothers, I lost my home, one, everybody except my mother. Her house just had 3 feet of water and like about a foot inside the home.
In what neighborhood did you live in?
Okay, I lived off of Robert E. Boulevard and Warrington Drive. That's close to UNO. And my brother lived on Pratt Drive, right where the levee broke. His house was here, and the levee was there, and it broke right in front of his house, so he got everything. He got mud, clay, fish, everything. He still can't go there. A big tree is still sitting on top of his house. In fact, the water is still leaking into his home because they haven't fixed the levee yet. They say they put some rocks and stuff, but it's flowing through the rocks.
They dropped a couple train cars to try and block it.
Nothing's working. And you know what? We're afraid because when September comes, if the levees are not fixed, we're going to be doing the same thing. And it's not going to take a Category 5 to destroy the city. It's going to take a Category 3 to do this all over again.
No,
just laying there because there's no
laying-
water.
Yeah. So we passed it, and the Jeep went on. I said, gee, I hope somebody comes along and picks that up. The following Tuesday, I came back, and the same body is same there, in the same spot. The Thursday I came back, somebody had put a tarp on it, but the body was still there. And the following Monday, when I came back, it had been moved.
How much
so
time
for
had
2
passed?
weeks
2 weeks.
to move a body.
Well, I had a friend.
You had a friend.
He went back to his shop over here on St. Charles Avenue, and it was the day after the storm. He and his wife stayed here, and he went to his shop, and there were 2 men in there bashing it with baseball bats.
And his shop was a fabric shop.
It's a fabric shop, but, they were just, there's not much you can damage you can, unless you just rip it, But, they just was going after everything in the building with a baseball bat. They weren't taking everything, they were destroying it. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Because we can." You see, it goes beyond the Marxist interpretation of economic man. If we were just economic creatures, they'd be taking it. But no, they were destroying it. There's a place right over here, Orvis, a friend of mine saw it happen. They let a whole bunch of hotel workers off on the corner of the Fairmont Hotel. They let a bunch of workers off. And they sat there. My friend brought them soup. This is right after the storm. And they sat there, and they sat there. Now, Orvis is a sporting goods, it's a small little place. And they sat there, and then suddenly their eyes, they saw the Orvis sign. So they went over, they bashed the door in, and they took everything, right? I know that.
Because they could.
They could. No, because they needed shoes. So they took the shoes off, their old shoes off, and they left them. I saw some of them when I got back. A friend of mine actually got some and cleaned them up and wears them, but that's a souvenir of the storm. But then after they took everything, then they shit and pissed over everything they couldn't take. So, what does that mean? That's fallen man. That is pre-Enlightenment a pre-Enlightenment interpretation. That is the old man that we thought we'd rid ourselves of by the great upfluvias, uprisings of the Bolsheviks and the stuff like that. We've never changed one bit. We are not. Our nature does not change. We are both angels and devils at the same time, and we're not in between.
And we try so hard.
We try. We have to try hard. That's what religion's all about. But
See, we don't have to give it a name. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to call it Buddhism or Taoism or Confucianism or, you know what I'm saying, Christianity. We can call it oneness.
Yet. All we know is the decision makers in that process did something that was, in my estimation, criminal, to expose an entire city, that many people, that many lives, to a shaky situation, something that was not safe. What they've done through, and I can't say it was incompetence because I don't know that it wasn't just a bad decision or maybe a compromised decision, but because of that decision, just the very fabric of our lives has just been torn apart. And you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
The level of being deep, and the levee system itself goes down to a certain point that they feel that it can't undermine. In other words, the water can't work its way underneath there. The parish engineers dredged below that, which allowed the water to start to eat away underneath there, and then 3 months before this storm happened, people along there, like Diane and some of those people, were complaining. There was water. It was already beginning to happen.
Right before Christmas, we finished the cosmetics and things of that nature, and now we're back living in Slidell. I'm on active duty right now, but the wife and kids have returned right before Christmas.
Did you ever think you would see something of this devastation in your lifetime?
No, ma'am. To be quite honest, you always think in terms of bad things happening, and especially being prepared in the military of a catastrophic event, but I never thought it would be the one. We've always talked about it, but honestly, if I said I know it's coming and this would happen, no, ma'am.
The ancient Egyptians believed that the Pharaoh was a god, and that if the Nile didn't overflow like it's supposed to do every year, it was his fault. And man, you paid the penalty in those days. They'd execute you, you know? So there's this thing in everybody, there's this sort of primitive part of our mind that still wants to blame somebody for for a natural disaster, you know? Oh, you know, like the Reverend Pat Robertson will say it's because the Sodomites in New Orleans. You know, now I half agree with him. I mean, there are Sodomites here, but he's right about that. But the thing is, I think
Hurricane Katrina didn't know that, right?
No, but I think there's you can say that a certain hedonistic lifestyle breeds like the grasshopper and the ant. Oh, the world owes me a living, la 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 la. You know that you've seen that cartoon, you know, the grasshopper. I mean, it's an Aesop fable, but the grasshopper, he just goes along playing his fiddle, and the ant's working up the things, and finally the grasshopper's knocking on the door of the ant because he was having too much fun. Well, you know, in a lot of ways, that kind of fun, this hedonistic lifestyle that people, not everybody is like that, but you know, it lends itself to a kind of a forgetfulness of potential disaster. You know, you're living on the edge of the volcano, but that's all right. We've seen, no doubt, the movie Pompeii. The last days of Pompeii is like that too.
Right.
And you know, and so we've been like that ever since the city was founded. And
City or the politicians are trying to get people to move back and rebuild hastily in order to help people have a sense of community and home?
They're under crossfire. Since twice as many black people were displaced in Orleans Parish than white people, although you get to the suburbs and then it changes completely. There's talk in the newspapers of there's a conspiracy theory, and this is to keep those people out, you know, that the planners want to keep those people out. And what most of the planners want to do is make sure that anybody that comes back will be able to stay and not have a false start, and also that when they do come back and they'll be able to have affordable housing. They'll be able to have affordable insurance. They'll be in a neighborhood that is populated, and they won't have a lot of surprises that they're going to face in the future. Or it's going to take us probably 10 years if we're lucky to get this this Category 5 protection in. I mean, that's going to be a massive program. And if we happen to have a Category 5 hurricane and we're only prepared for a 3, then we could have the same thing that we had for this one. I mean, it's a possibility.
For it to happen again. Yes, they look for it. They feel it's going to happen again. And I guess that's the excitement of it. You know what I'm saying? In other words, the anticipation. See, in other words, now am I going to be prepared this time?
And what does being prepared look like?
Being prepared means to be able to benefit from it. You know what I'm saying? See, the people wasn't prepared, so you lost lives. See, when Rita hit out in Lake Charles, those people were pre-prepared from Katrina. You see, even the country, the president, and all those people, they wasn't prepared because they had the thing going on in Iran and Iraq and all that, and finances were over there and the military was over there. So when all this happened, it was a slow response. All right, so after this happened, and everybody got on their toes and they got on their job and they went, so now they was in a state of preparation. So if we looking at if devastation would come from like a war, a tragedy like that, now we ready because now we conscious. But we don't want to forget, like you saying.
Asleep at the wheel.
Right. We don't want to go to sleep at the wheel.
You see what I'm getting with the 20th century is not what you think it is. It's an enormous amount of hypocrisy, and it's mainly based upon a non-historical way of thinking of the remembered past. If we'd remembered where the city of New Orleans was, instead of trying to put it into the the sunny uplands of the future, if we stopped thinking in terms of this utopia that we're headed towards and thought about what the city really is and where it is, we'd been a lot better off. But they don't think like that because you know what? Politicians lie to you and to themselves at the same time, and that's how they get elected. They create this rosy future. They're like developers. They're the same ilk. The rosy future that they're going to give you if you just elect them, or if you just let them bash away by their way in, and that's been this city's entire downfall. Is that we've always bet on the wrong horse, except Maestri, Robert Maestri, and
well, we don't know what's going to happen with this bill, in the Baker bill. That'll give them 60% of the value of the house and pay off their mortgage, or a combination of the two.
I'm not angry yet. I don't have a focus. I haven't figured it out. There's so much. I guess my frustration right now is that we don't have clear information. We don't have a clear leader. We don't have a clear plan of what is going to happen to the city. Since my house is so close to the levee, I don't know if they're going to condemn my neighborhood. I don't know if I'm going to be part of the green space for the new levee, which they are going to have to build if they're going to recover New Orleans. I don't know. I have a building permit, but I don't want to use it right now because I see no sense in putting money into a house that may get torn down. So I have no answers. For the first time in my life, I don't have anything that I can take and then take action. I'm just sitting and waiting.
Complete limbo.
Yes, exactly.
Off camera, and you expressed something very strongly about why it took so long to get help to New Orleans.
Well, I think like the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, possibly it's because of a different president, Teddy Roosevelt. Congress was in session in 2 days over this disaster, and the Army was sent in the next day, within 24 hours. That didn't happen here, and I think that part of the reason is because we're an empire, because we're fighting a war way on the other side of the globe, and the part of the Louisiana National Guard was fighting that war. They weren't here to be here in Louisiana, where they should have been. Now, empires like we've got, like we've had since the New Deal, since Woodrow Wilson, empires rot from the center because they have to start. They've extended themselves out to the borders, and what happens is they don't take care of the very center of the empire. And New Orleans might not be exactly the center of the empire, but this catastrophe proves a very important point that we are wasting our time in Iraq, right?
Is nature really that powerful? Is it that strong? And you come to the realization that you have no clue. You have no idea.
It makes you feel kind of minuscule.
If you're going to be a religious person, this is the time to think about the strength and the power of nature, God, or whatever it is that you believe. And then you have to think to yourself, well, in God's way, look at what we have here. Look at what New Orleans is. Look at what the Gulf Coast is. What good can possibly come out of it, out of this mess? And then all of a sudden you see people back working and people back thinking about, well, how are we going to clean this up?
Rebuilding.
People thinking about, well, this is terrible, but what are we going to do about Mardi Gras? I mean, and you think to yourself, there's a spirit. And if this is God's way, a cleansing, as it were, to say, okay, what is there in your life that is important? What is it in your life that is worth living for? It separates the men from the boys. You don't know the amount of people who have killed themselves. Just come back and look at their homes and just...
What is the suicide rate?
It's 300% above the national average.
From what I understand, when people see you in the Humvees, I hear that when we see the Humvees, we feel safe. So you've brought people a lot of security and sense of safety back into an area that is so unpredictable and feeling very, very unstable to a lot of people. So how does that feel to you to know that you're out there giving people a sense of protection?
It's a great feeling. It's what we do as soldiers. We wear the uniform and we protect and serve our country. And we have a lot of good men and women that put on this uniform. And at the end of the day, it's a very good feeling to know you made a difference in your city. Like I said, this is very personal because I grew up here my whole life. I love the city, and a lot of people feel the same way. So it's an extra incentive to secure the city, make sure it's as safe as possible so we can get the rebuilding process full speed ahead.
Kind of like protecting your own family, maybe?
Yes, ma'am. Great analogy.
The railroads got it right. The railroads knew how high to build. They apparently came in they came in the 1850s and 1870s, 1880s, like that, and 1840s, some of the local ones, and their engineers apparently looked at the flooding history of the city, and they said, well, we don't want to be affected that, so we'll build these big mounds that we put our railroad tracks on. So they're there. They're right at about 3 or 4 feet above sea level. So they are maybe 5 feet above sea level. So they didn't get any water. So anything that was built up to the same level as the railroad tracks did okay. Whether they were in Broadmoor or Mid-City or wherever. So the railroads got it right. Their engineers did a good job of keeping them out of the muck.
Well, humor certainly has its place in tragedy, doesn't it?
It has its place totally. I think that at the whole center of the universe, I think at the very center of it is laughter. Is that feeling. You know what I'm getting at? I think God is laughing at us constantly.
It certainly makes my life worth living.
Well, this friend of mine, you better. This friend of mine was here from Atlanta, and he's very politically correct. I was telling him all these stories, and you could see he was trying to, still I can't laugh. I said, let it out, pal. I said,
Hope. I've seen a thing that has given me hope, inspiration. Purpose. Oh, come on. That was my last message. Purpose. What have you purpose in your heart?
Aw. That was your last message. Are you a preacher?
Yes.
You are.
Yes.
For a local church?
Yes.
And your last
Devastating.
sermon was about what is the purpose in your heart?
What did you purpose in your heart? Yes.
And they just sent us money, checks. They sent us brand new clothes, Gucci shoes, Gucci purses, stuff I've never worn before in my life. Hilfiger shirts with the price tag still on it.
Is style really important at a time like that?
Yes, it still was important. I still had to stay in fashion, okay? And the people in DeRidder were very nice. They brought food to my sister's house to feed everyone. The priest, the church my sister belonged to, DeRidder, Louisiana, it's about 45 minutes from Lake Charles, and on every corner there's a church. I think they're like, what do they call? I made fun of the name Millerites. What are they called?
Mennonites?
Mennonites.
Call them Mennonites.
Mennonites. I used to call them Millerites, because I do. They were really, 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 really nice to us.
Speak, you know, they're trying to reinterpret this event to, that there wasn't all that nastiness, looting. I can assure you there was.
Talk to us a minute. How are you adjusting emotionally since this experience?
I think I haven't yet. I think actually I'm probably still in the numb phase. You go through the shock phase, and then you go through the anger phase, and then you get to cry. I'm just getting to the anger stage. I've been so busy. It's a full-time job being homeless. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I never realized how much work it was between standing in line or on the phone, trying to reach FEMA, SBA, the insurance companies, all of that. It's mind-boggling. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. It's a full-time job.
What do you think the good has come out of this whole Katrina? What good do you see?
I think it brought family who evacuated the city, wherever they went to. I think it brought them closer together. Because my family, like I said, we all went to DeRidder, Louisiana. And there were 9 of us, but we were close. Don't get me wrong, we were close, but we never went to church together. All 9 of us didn't go to dinner together. And it started where every Wednesday, all of us were going to dinner together, one big family. We were all going to church together on Sundays. And we didn't do it as a family before. We just did it individually, but now that because of Katrina, we have found a blessing within ourselves and within our family. That family is the
Matters more than anything.
it's the most important thing in the whole wide world, is family. Yes.
A friend of mine, there's a really neat, exclusive supermarket uptown. They have debutantes at the cash registers. It's called Langenstein's. A friend of mine went up there, this is a few weeks ago, and she was really worried about how hangdog everybody's gotten. People are worried, and I've been feeling like kind of awful myself, and it's like came a lot later than you'd think, but this lady my friend had gone into Langenstein's. There was this lady, old uptown lady. She was struggling with these lemons at the fruit bin, trying to put them in those little skimpy plastic bags. She was dropping them, and so my friend went up and helped her. Huge bag of lemons, and she says, "Oh." My friend says, very genteel. She says, "I suppose you're going to make a lemon meringue." And she said, "No, my dear, they're for whiskey sours."
Well,
It was 2.5 weeks, something like that.
water sat 2.5 weeks in your house, just eroding the drywall, the wood, every furniture.
Yes, that's correct. My furniture that got destroyed, I think, was mostly destroyed from the initial onset of the water, when it came rushing in, because my first floor looked like somebody had taken all my furniture and put it in a blender with mud. And the furniture, it wasn't just the wood glue that came apart, it was shattered. It was just splinters, yeah. And then because of the length of time it sat in the house, the wall board got soft, and even my artwork that was above the water line fell into the water because the walls got soft. So things that could have possibly been saved couldn't be saved because of the length of time that the water sat in. Had the water just gone in and come out, I would not have lost quite as much as I've lost.
As a matter of fact, I'm glad I was here to see this. I'm not glad, but I'm impressed. It's something deep. It goes deep because
It made an impression on you.
It makes an impression, but it's more than that. It's a philosophical experience. It's a real, like this guy down the street's a friend of mine. He's a newspaper man. He said, "George, this is the story of my life." I've actually seen it happen, right? And it's a real climactic. It's like being in the firebombing of Dresden or something like that. It's something you never forget. It's sort of. Somebody said, "Well, are you going to paint it?" I said, "No, I doubt it." Did they paint the sack of Rome in 1527? I don't see any pictures of the sack of Rome. Do you? No, I'm not. I said, I'm afraid I'm set in my way. Although I am going to do a couple of things. I am going to do a painting of I have a thing I did years ago. It was when there was a scandal involving contracting at the Superdome, and it was a picture of the Superdome with a toilet tank on the back of it, and it said at the bottom, "Where were you when the shit hit the fans?" Right? And I realized that art is prophecy. You think, that the Superdome would become the image of the whole thing, of the whole catastrophe, but not just the natural catastrophe, but this confusion that erupted after it, the human catastrophe. And I don't mean just what happens to people, but how immobile and how immobilized the elected body had become. That we think we elect our leaders, and we don't. We haven't elected a leader since George Washington. If we do, it's a total accident.
Well, the one thing that touched me was very ordinary. One day I was in a supermarket, and an elderly woman came up to me, and we were coming down the same aisle, and she was walking slow, so I got to the right a little bit so she could pass, and then she came towards me, and I was like, well, maybe she want to tell me something. So I just stopped in my tracks, and after that, she kept approaching me, and she got close enough to touch me, and she didn't say a word. So finally, she just reached her arms around me and gave me a hug, and kept walking. Didn't say a word, and that touched me inside. She didn't say a word, but she said plenty.
I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of days ago. I said they're using the storm to do things that they wanted to do anyway, except now the storm, they figured everybody softened up, you can't resist them. Like the commercialization of Carnival. They want to have, the Nokia Carnival, the South Central Bell Rex Parade, stuff like that, the Coca-Cola Mardi Gras. Well, that was they thought about doing that before, but now they think people are demoralized enough to say, okay, we realize the wisdom of all these plans. Well, there's a lot of resistance still left on the bone for shit like that, anyway. There's this old lady lived at the Tivoli, this terrible thing. They had to clear everybody out of the Tivoli. It was HUD housing, for the elderly. And they moved a bunch of them up to Indianapolis. And this one lady called, this friend of hers, this 85-year-old lady, she said, "I'd rather smell the shit in New Orleans than the roses in Indianapolis." She wanted to get back here real bad, even though, there's some things worse than hurricanes, than natural catastrophes, other American cities gone.
And did you ever think you would see it in your own backyard?
No. And that's the part that's most touching, that it is personal. And I've seen and walked these streets and grew up in the city and love the city dearly, so it's hard to deal with at times. But with all the New Orleans natives and things of that nature, we've been able to overcome. And it's going to be a long road back. I tell everybody that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but we'll be back.
To get back up to the peak of the almost 500,000 people we had here. If you do it right, it could take you 5 to 10 years. If you do it wrong, I guess it could take you about 3 years. But then people are shooting themselves in the foot.
Putting themselves back at risk.
Yeah, back at risk. And a lot of people aren't going to come back, and a lot of people are going to be smart enough not to come back into those situations. It's the chef down the street at that little deli. He was in one of the bowls right by UNO. He had the water was over the top of the house, And in that same, it's between the Robert E. Lee on Leon C. Simon, right below the University of New Orleans, around Elysian Fields. And that's one of the ends, like the ends of Gentilly and the ends of Lakeview and all. They're real low like that. And he's not gonna rebuild in the end. He doesn't want to build a raised house. Probably UNO will end up taking that area over and probably filling it, just or eliminating the utilities and the infrastructure and putting in their own for the expansion at their campus if they ever decide to, and putting in a lot of mud.
Would you go back and build there if nobody
No.
else was?
No. And that's why our house is still sitting. We took everything out, took all the furniture out, but what sense does it make to rebuild your home when 100 other people are not doing it? And my house is going to be worth what? Nothing. You know, they're going to be called blighted houses. We're trying to get rid of the blighted property, but that's what New Orleans have now. Nothing but blighted property. Everybody's afraid to rebuild. Not just because nobody else is rebuilding, because they don't know what's going to happen in September. You know,
When September being the next hurricane
Look,
season.
September is usually a bad month for us. The later part of August and September is really a bad month for us. But let me tell you something. That's all they have to do next year is say a thunderstorm, and I'm gone.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gone.
You
I'm not
wouldn't,
waiting.
you
I'm
wouldn't
not,
try and hang
no,
around.
I'm not gonna. My brother hung around. 2 brothers of mine hung around. They were in the water to their neck. One had a little boy. How old was he then? He was 3 years old. They had him on his shoulder.
Bless your heart. I think we have to.
Carnival's still going on, you know, and people are still behaving normally, but I tell you what, there's a spirit in the air, you know.
Kind of ghostly.
Yeah, it's not, you know, but, and it's not, I don't think it's necessarily negative. I don't think it's negative. I think it's very positive, and I think that we have an opportunity here to see things are done right from now on, you know. I mean, I'm not talking about politics so much as what our politicians do.
Being held accountable.
Well, I'm hoping, like somebody said, well, what were you expecting when you got back? I said, I was expecting to see the One Shell Square building collapse into Poydras Street. But that didn't happen. He said, what do you think the biggest danger is to New Orleans? I said, developers. That's one thing we've got to keep out of these neighborhoods, out of the hands of these developers. It has to be done small. There can be no large plans. Make no big plans. You know, the reverse of what Dan Burnham said in Chicago at the time of the Chicago World's Fair. We got to make sure the city remains small, and small chunks, neighborhoods.
And
That's
the reason
the issue.
for that, I believe,
Is so we can avoid political tyranny, right?
okay.
Right? I mean, I'm a states' writer, actually, in that sense. I think that the jewel in the crown of the city of New Orleans is that it had these neighborhoods.
Yes,
You know, it had and when I was a kid, the neighborhoods were so neighborhood that you could even tell by their accent where these people came from. You could tell how they pronounced things. That, oh, Ninth Ward. Oh, you went to Holy Name School. You know, that's uptown. You could tell where they came from. You could actually identify them. It's like London was in the 19th century. And
Yeah, I mean, I would think people ought to really try to go for making themselves safe rather than just hastily going back in. If they go, anybody that goes hastily back in, if we have anything again, then they're going to permanently leave, and a whole bunch of other people are going to permanently leave, and then we may end up, people may be just scared to come back to the city again after if we go in too hastily. Whereas if you go in and you actually take some precautions and we build right and we build for potential flooding, even though we do go after the flood protection, then if we do have a flood, we'll say, well, I built high enough, and you know, my bicycles got flooded or something like that, or my lawnmower got flooded. But I think that's crazy.
So what they're going to do now is, first thing they're going to do, which is smart, is rather than go crazy doing construction they're not 100% sure of, they're going to build gates where these canals go into the lake, the river. And if these storms hit, they close those gates so the surge can't push the water through, which is what they should have done in the first place.
Like a lock system.
My father, they bought a home. They relocated in Mississippi.
So you had a place to go to.
Right.
Right. And when you came back,
Devastating. Yes, it's an emotional turmoil, total confusion.
Are you still in that state of confusion, do you think, 4 months later?
We coming out. We coming out.
Yeah.
We coming back.
You're coming back.
We coming back.
That's what everybody
Yes.
that's here is saying. We're
Yeah,
coming back.
yeah,
Are
we're
you gonna-
coming back.
Do you think you're going to be able to rebuild where you are?
Yes, we're gonna rebuild. We have to leave a legacy. Yes, we have to maintain. We have to stand. We have to be strong.
And that's for who?
That's for the go on. We got to keep going. See, you can't be defeated. You got to keep going forward. Yes,
Yeah.
you got to keep
Where did
going.
you learn that from?
What did I through this experience?
This experience.
Yeah, I learned that through. See, in other words, through the Word of God.
Yeah.
But that's my lifestyle. That's how I live.
It's the human spirit, isn't
Right, right. But it's mixed with God's spirit. See, we couldn't do it on our own. In our own strength, we would have been defeated.
it? Right.
Like I said, this is a climactic, something that is going to have to, we'll get over it, but I think our minds will be changed about a lot of things, about our fellow men. I don't think my friend, the supermarket manager, is ever going to trust his customers ever again.
What would you like to say to all fellow New Orleans residents who are out there dispersed throughout the United States?
I'd like to say keep the faith and hope, and with God, anything is possible. We will come through this, and we can't wait to see you, and welcome back when you guys do come back, because I know you're coming back.
Any final word? One final word
Not really. Not to which people?
to the people that are here now.
In New Orleans? The ones that have remained, the remnant? Yes, don't leave. Don't leave. Support your local supermarket.
Don't buy Coca-Cola.
Don't buy Coca-Cola. Yes. Throw down your cell phones. What else? Well, yes, turn off your TV. Read more. Exactly. Yes, okay.
And what would you like to say to everybody out there who has just heard of this and now it's on the back page news and possibly they've forgotten? What would you like to say to them?
Don't put trust in things, because things aren't your source. They're just an overflow,
A distraction, maybe?
a camouflage.
What is the source?
The source is God, the inner you, the one.
The one. Yeah.
That's the source. Yes. When we have to understand that we are one. We are part of each other. And that's the only way. See, God had to wake up this country. He had to shake the consciousness, because the people here weren't the only ones affected. The country was affected.
Yes.
Because now you had to reach outside of yourself, just like you're doing right now. You come here, you reaching outside of yourself. You came out of your comfort zone. Yes.
Yes.
And I'm feeling that. Yes. Yeah, I'm feeling that.